to be talking to you all. And today is a session about a subject that's important for every one of us. It touches us personally, professionally, and our communities, which is a holistic inclusion approach for gender equity and social inclusion. How we can make sure that we are not just counting numbers, but we are creating impact in our societies and communities. Here with you, I'm Bahar Aljammoor, Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning Manager for Ta'afi, as locally known, or Iraq Regional Program in Iraq, funded by USAID, implemented by Chemonics. And I would like to also introduce you to our panelists, the machines of making Jesse from an idea to an impact through their wonderful leadership and thoughtful inputs and process for implementing it. So I have two panelists with me today to introduce themselves. Saeed, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm calling in from Baghdad, Iraq. My name is Saeed-CHEMONICS. I'm a senior advisor at Chemonics International and currently serving as the Chief of Party for the Iraq Regional Program, which is a USAID Office of Transition Initiatives program.
Hello, Saeed. I'm Sabreen.
Thank you, Bahar. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabreen. I'm Procurement Manager with the USAID Iraq program, Ta'afi. I'm also the current Jesse Chair.
Well, thank you both. So I want to tell you something about our project before we start. And the Ta'afi program, or Iraq Regional Program, is a unique OTI, or Office of Transition Initiatives program that we support communities in Iraq in very marginalized areas through small grants with local partners and influencers and community leaders to serve their community, to empower their voices and their actions in different sectors such as education, health, governance, and different subjects. For that, because our project is very short-term project, and it was never believable that a short-term project can have an impact through gender equity and social inclusion in their programming. But before a year, we started to think much more intentionally about gender equity and social inclusion, and how can we not just take it as a passive approach, but take it as an active approach. And you can't imagine how much we have achieved within 1 year, how our communities that we are working in has been like much more inclusive. The voices of the underrepresented groups are much more heard in the society through our activities. I don't want to get all of your excitement from now. I want to show you a video to tell the story, and then we're gonna tell you more about the impact and the lessons learned that we had. So the video we're gonna show you is one of our grants that we supported few women passionate in a very, very, let's say, insecure area of Iraq that has been damaged by ISIS. They said, we don't gonna stop serving our community. Yes, women has challenges, but we're gonna make it. And then we supported them through their mission to make this impossible possible. And I want you all to see the video, enjoy it, and then we're gonna continue our discussion.
وارجين مجموعة كاكاجكاج مختلفة مكونات ومناطق شنقالة. الدها زارو بيستوديوما فريقي خو تأسيس كريا. هدف الرئيسي تأسيس فريقي وارجين أو بو إجبار كجوجن بنا ضحية حرم ستريس سردست تيرورست داعش رسالة دها زارو چاردي ويكسريجي كجوجنت ازيدياك هاتان هوب هزارات قرتينا لو ما جي ما تفاس كان ببنا دنجي خوا ودنجي هر كجوجنت. بلى هروها وارجين قلك أهدافي خابون إشوان أهدافها محاولات أم تركيزي واهتمامي بدن فئات ذوي احتياجات الخاصة وحالات إنساني أم بقيهن خلقي أم تسوية نيف مجتمع ذا تشيكن أكيد أم دورنا كن جندرت بيجن كفريق وارجين شما افتني كاتشن لما تخست كأم بوضحين إجبر كان العراق افتني بلكي الشرق الأوسط همو كده دور ندعنا كتوجنا دا دوري خبينين لما أفريك اختار كسوشيال ميديا وأعلام أم دوري خبينين
يكش أهداف وارجينة رئيسي أم دعمي جنابكن وسرقة دايت وان بالشغل وقوتا وان الشغل وان شخل كرا خويابكن وخاصة جنيت شنقالي أو يتكل حربيرة معاناة النزوحي وشخط فاندني خلاص بوين نبس الآلجنة مبتنيت شغلن قال لك أهداف مدي هنا ويكجي دعمة مواهبة شباب بكن وقصص وان شخل كرا خويا بكن وأمامي نبدع مع أخوة أعلامي بوانرا دا قصص ونجاحاتي وان ديمت خويا بن شخل كرا
بريا وارجين مكاريم تنقل قندا وجيت أثري وجاي شنقالي أوجي دام تاريخ وثقافة أخوة الزمان أخوة بدنا أخوة كرد
الهرب قندكي وهرجهكي نيفا باجرة شنقال دا والدور بريد وين أم الدنجي خلق الجرهن أو الدنجي وان اتوندا جا أم بدنجي بلندكن وبجهينن هرجهكا أم مهتم ومعني وبالفعل خلال فيسالي مكاري أم دنجي قلقا بجهينن وأم السر قلق قضايا مجتمعي بشغل
راسنا منطقة ما منكوبة بها بتره الوشاندية أم تركيزة سربي تشتيتكن ليه جانبك إيجابي جيشن قال ده هي أم تحاولين خويا كنوك خلكي بقريا يدست بشغل ومشروعي خوكري إجبر خلكي ما مستحقة تشتكي وساجرة بيا خويا كرين أم تركيزة دنا جانب إيجابي جي بريا وارجين
بلي بهروها اهتمام الدن هم المناسبات الديني الشنقال دي هم مكوناتها بفرق جداهي هم جبيرا لكن فريق وارجين هاتان هو ايه كي يجدين وعيكسر مستوى العراقي.
Well, thank you for watching, and this is so heartwarming when you see an area that has been like suffering under ISIS, that's recovering in an inclusive way. It's a very sad story, but there's also a lot of hope in that video through Warjeen and so many other groups like them that we are supporting through our grants by intentionally designing for people who they are underrepresented activities for them in our activities. I don't want to talk about it all. I want our panelists to tell you all about it. So I want to start with this question. Why holistic inclusion approach? Why gender equity and social inclusion in our program? What is the most impact you have also seen? I will start with Saeed.
Thank you, Bahar. And really, it's great seeing that video and the great work that Warjeen is doing. And really, that video represents the reason why we started this journey for a more inclusive program. As a stabilization program, we really recognize the importance of reaching and including as much of the community as possible. In traditional stabilization context, from my own experience working in Libya and Syria and Palestine, we really found that our partners, decision makers, the influencers, primarily came from one sliver of society, one part of it, primarily men, older men. And we weren't including others in thinking about the priorities or the issues that the community was facing, primarily because we couldn't reach them, or we weren't intentionally thinking through how their priorities might be different. And as a result of not speaking to them, we weren't including those in our programming. And so as Iraq entered this phase of post-conflict reconstruction, and looking at some of the fractures within society that were left in the wake of the conflict, we wanted to make sure that we were really taking the views of everybody into our programming and making sure that everybody was part of the activities we were supporting. We knew in particular in Iraq, women were particularly marginalized and vulnerable coming out of the conflict. and left out of the public spaces in lots of the communities. But at the same time, in 2019, we saw women pour out into the streets as part of a protest movement demanding change in the country. So in seeing that, we thought maybe we need to question some of our own assumptions about what's possible when thinking about inclusion, and seeing if we can build a stronger program by being more intentional and explicit in the way that we were approaching our strategy and the design of our activities. We thought that more importantly, for us to be able to promote diverse and inclusive programming, our team needed to reflect that as well. And this is where the concept of the holistic inclusion approach came from. We didn't want to walk into a community and start speaking about inclusion and diversity when our own team was not ready to do that or didn't represent the diversity and inclusion of the communities that we supported. And finally, and just looking at some higher level statistics, we knew that as we tried to build a more inclusive team, that women participation in the workforce in Iraq was very, very low, 10 to 15%, if not lower, especially in the communities that we were working in. And other marginalized and vulnerable groups, such as people with disabilities, people from different religious ethnic minority groups, people with disabilities, were also not part of the workforce. So that further emphasized to us that the intentional effort wasn't just required at the programming level, but was really part of how we were going to look at building a team as well.
Perfect. So Saeed, you are telling me that you actually considered gender equity and social inclusion twice, one of them in programming and one of them in our team in IRP or Iraq Regional Program. Sabreen, could you please tell me a couple of examples? What were the most impactful examples through this program, operationally and program-wise?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Bahar. So adding to what Saeed was mentioning, the most impactful thing was in our program is that we intentionally designed our grants by engaging women. By engaging women and in decision making and listening to their voices. An example on this one, what we did in south of Iraq. In south of Iraq, there are a lot of, let's say, social restrictions for women, like they cannot even go out of their homes. So what we did, the approach that we did is that we engaged mothers, for example, in the Parents Council. So this was the approach in our programming. In our internally, let's say, we identified that there were a gap of women participation in a few sectors, such as HR, security, and mail. So what we did in our internship program, we encouraged women to participate in those sectors. As in Iraq, particularly, those sectors can be considered as dominated by men only. Also, I wanted to add that yes, the most impactful it was women engaging. However, we saw a great results with youth, people with disability, and ethnologists engagement also.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And this is, a great example because it's not just women there underrepresented in the society, but there are other also groups, especially in Iraq, because we are a very diverse ethno-religious communities there in Iraq. One of the researchers was saying 120 ethno-religious and social groups. So I'm glad that we are considering all of that in GESI and intentional programming. Okay, so now I would like to talk about, because you have piloted this and you are still learning and adapting through this process, what has been the biggest challenge in in considering holistic inclusion approach or gender equity and social inclusion in the program or in the operation of the program? Saeed, would you like to tell us some?
Yeah, sure. And I think this is where, in thinking about how we wanted to design this approach, it's where we put the most time and effort in. We knew that building an inclusive program and even just talking about inclusion and gender equity and so on the program could possibly lead to some resistance and some skepticism from some of our staff. Inclusion can be seen as a very broad term, and we really wanted to get it right from the beginning. So we started off thinking through how could we even define the term and what it meant to us as a program and what it meant to the communities we were supporting and what it meant to Iraqis. As we saw from the video that you just showed, there were definitely questions around the inclusion and participation of women and girls in society, as well as the role of women in the workplace. But we also had questions around the different religious and ethnic minorities that exist in Iraq, especially those that were in many of the communities that we were working with, and communities that were essentially traumatized by the conflict with ISIS as well. So in wanting to get it right and recognizing that there could be a lot of skepticism around this idea, we really looked to our staff and our partners and the communities to explain to us what inclusion meant to them. How can you define what inclusion meant, and what were some of the examples of exclusion that you saw in the everyday workplace, in the communities that you were supporting, and on the activities that you were implementing? And what we found is that across the board, women and girls were seen as a priority. People with disabilities were also, both physical and mental disabilities were also kind of highlighted as a community in need of additional consideration. And we also needed to look at what were some of the barriers preventing religious and ethnic minorities and participating in our programming. So by going to our staff and our partners to define what inclusion meant, we really essentially defined the term in an inclusive way, to continue to use that term. But it's really what helped us get over potential skepticism with our staff. We knew that some would see a push for diversity and inclusion as a US or a Western concept. And we heard people explaining to us that gender equity and social inclusion was not needed in Iraq because everybody was doing great, and there was no need to pursue this effort. And so in doing the kind of visioning workshop with the staff, those more skeptical staff were able to hear from their colleagues about how they have felt some challenges in the workplace, how they have seen some challenges in the communities we were supporting, and really challenge assumptions that more skeptical staff might have had. And it really helped us build a grassroots approach to how we were thinking about inclusion, and was really, I would say, the strongest pillar of our approach in terms of more sustainable and more real change that we wanted to achieve. And I think the other challenge that we were aware of, and I think everyone has seen this on other programs, when we see new priorities come up, the first knee-jerk reaction is to create a position that is solely focused on that new priority. And then that priority and thinking of that priority becomes very kind of siloed to that position, and it becomes more superficial in how we're thinking about it. So that was another challenge that we had identified, and we really wanted to work against, because really what we were trying to achieve was more transformational And we wanted to try to stay away from more superficial ways of trying to check specific boxes for donors or clients.
That's great. So I think just as a summary, you have tried to localize the term and localize also in the staff how GESI can be or gender equity and social inclusion can be considered. That's great. So Sabreen, why don't you tell us a little bit about the challenges in programming that you have faced and what were the possible measurements that you had? Because you mentioned, like, I'm sure that people saw Warjin, so shiny example, and then you mentioned that in some areas, women, they cannot even go out from their houses. So what was the challenge and how was the solution that filled that gap?
Yeah, thank you, Bahar. Like as you mentioned, the challenge was the women participation. Like as we said, in the south of Iraq area, there were restrictions. The women cannot go out of their homes. Also, they cannot participate even in mixed groups, discussions, or activities. So, and those challenges, of course, as we know, were due to the social norms. So, what we did, like, we know that those challenges are different from a place to another. So, what we did, we were thinking to localize our solutions based on the needs of each area. So we were like the solutions, the localized solutions that we did, we engaged women, we engaged with women-led organizations, and we encouraged women to participate, as I said, in the Parents Council. We engaged also families to come with them. And sometimes what we did, like we said, they cannot participate in a mixed groups. And even if they attend, they will like only listening. So what we did, we conduct consultation sessions only for women. Why? For them to participate and they can speak up, not just come and listen.
That's really great. So you are saying even more than the localization of the term and localization of the idea among the staff, even localize the solution so women or underrepresented group can participate. And that's really great because so many times we just count like, okay, they participated, that's it. But you mentioned it's not just about the participation, it's about raising the voice. At the end, we work on do no harm principle, and that's really great to see what solutions suits women and what solutions that they provide, because we need to listen to their solutions too. So that's really great. Thank you for that. Now I'm curious about one thing that, okay, how do we measure all of those things in our team? How we say, okay, we are now considering gender equity and social inclusion, or in our programming, we say, okay, now we are fine, we are improving, we are getting there. What are the measurements? What are the metrics that we depend on operationally, Saeed?
Yeah, and this is a great question. And it's, as with all things in our sector, sometimes it's a bit complicated. Especially because we were not looking for simple change. We were really looking at a level of transformation within our staff, because we truly believe that by seeing that change through our staff, we would then see really strong programming that was also inclusive. And so for me, and where I sit as the chief of party for the program, what I was looking for was how the staff were responding, moving the needle from the initial skepticism of what it meant to be inclusive to really starting to see organic efforts to try to build a more inclusive team. There are plenty of examples that we've seen over the last year and a half, where staff on their very own raise issues to our senior management team about different practices that we've had in place that may have been perceived as exclusive to some of our colleagues. Very simple things such as our holiday schedule. Was it inclusive? Was it taking into account some of the needs of the different religious and ethnic minority groups on our program? Issues of safety and security. Were we taking into account the unique needs of people with disabilities when thinking through our safety and security approach? Were we being more intentional in thinking through our leave policies and what that meant for staff with children or staff with family at home that they had to take care of? Once we opened up this door of talking about inclusion, we immediately started to hear all these different ways that staff were challenged in different policies and procedures. And they weren't coming from an external consultant. They weren't coming from me and reviewing things. They were coming from the staff after we had the conversation about what it meant to be inclusive, what it meant to be respectful and provide some concessions to staff that might need them to achieve their full potential. So it was really that level of transformation that I was looking for and what I put a metric on. And it's really impressive to see how far we've been able to take it. We use Teams, Microsoft Teams, as a communications platform. And we're often having conversations about different holidays that are out there or different issues that might come up. And we oftentimes see considerations for different components of our project and how that might affect them and how we might want to be thinking about things a bit differently. And that's within the project. And I think Sabreen can talk a lot about what we've seen in the actual programming side after we saw that internal transformation.
That's really great. And Saeed, that's very important because at the end, those people are the people who they also implement the program. And I think that's what you were like trying to point out very clearly, that if we don't consider it ourselves, we cannot be a role model for our partners, for our community, taking the principle and applying it on every day, because there is no person can follow up with everyone all the time to consider this and that. At the end, people, if they don't believe in it, they cannot take it into consideration. That's really great, and observation, of course, and those discussions are very powerful metrics of transformations. So, so for the program inside Sabreen, how do we capture those stories? How do we capture? Is it just numbers, or is there like any other ways that we are measuring our impact as program?
Yeah, sure, Bahar. So we know like we are celebrating our success. However, we are not only celebrating our success, we are celebrating also our learning. Through what? Through engaging, like we have sharing or recording Jessie stories. Also, we will integrating Jessie in our grants or activities, in our learning objectives and programming and meal measurements by inclusive data collections. Also adding to that, we will evaluating our grants or activities in a Jessie level. After doing this evaluation, we were doing the intentional design, intentional learning of design of our activities and grants based on the evaluation that we did.
That's really wonderful. And, you know, so many times we mentioned also at the beginning, when we talk about participation, access, and including gender or even other social groups, these are things that so many times we see numbers. So many times we see that they say, okay, the number of the people with disability was like 20% of the participants, or number of women was that percentage. And so many times you have also mentioned, Sabreen, that those sometimes mean that they are just filling gaps. They are just numbers, but they don't have like a meaningful participation. And stories is a more powerful way to say, okay, this was their participation, and this is the result of their participation. How do they feel? I recall you mentioned one of our South areas, and I recall one of the monitoring evaluation reports that I was reviewing as a monitoring evaluation person, it was like a woman saying that this is my first time in my life someone takes my opinion. And this was when we were like designing one of the parks, when we were telling them, how would you like it to be so you can visit the place? And they were like, okay, we are confused because this is our first time to give our opinion. And then they had really good inputs to that. So it makes them more comfortable as women to come out of their house, to go and sit in the park, which is for so many of us might be shocking thing, because we have access to so many resources, places, we have this freedom, but there are women in the southern side of Iraq as well might struggle from even visiting a park next to their home. And I can proudly say so many of those stories Sabreen and her team, they are sharing. Sabreen, would you like to tell me this story that I cannot take it out of my mind, that women participated in a volunteerism in South?
Yes, thank you, Bahar. Volunteerism, like for women, as I said, like it's necessary for them to go out of their homes. So what we did, since we are engaging with the women-led organization, this like encouraged them to participate and do those cleanup campaigns. And we saw like several of women participate in South area, which like there are, I don't want to say like it's zero engagement of women or participation, but we saw women go and participate in those cleanup campaigns with male. So this is what we did in South areas.
That's great. So your approach of like women-led organization has created that trust with the community to have them. And you mentioned also earlier how you designed so you can be more inclusive to families, so they can come with their families until that trust increases. We saw that also in our team, because we had like staff members, they were very hesitant to travel to Erbil alone without families, and how we accommodated that through our policies, through our procedures, being more flexible to travel with families. And I think this family concept has been program-wise and also operational-wise something effective and something definitely for other programs to look at and consider. That's great. Thank you both. I have another question now. How all of those audience that they are listening to us, or they will be listening to us during the recorded session, what is your advice for them when they start freshly a new GESI approach they accommodated in their program, or they have started but they are trying to figure out how they can be more impactful? So tell us a little bit of the operational also and programming advice that you have, Saeed.
Yeah, and just before I get into that, to kind of build off of Sabreen's point and in your question just now, I think another indicator of success that we were looking at, and it's also advice for others, is recognizing that we're not always going to get it right, and that sometimes the journey to build a more inclusive team and a more inclusive program involves realizing that you've made mistakes and could be better in some certain areas. And I think this is something that, you know, we went in recognizing that we weren't going to do the perfect job in trying to achieve this. I remember in one of the first conversations we had with our team, we were very honest and transparent, and we said, hey, like, we recognize, based on the feedback that we received from our staff and our partners in our communities, that we're going to be more inclusive, that we need to be more inclusive. And we also recognize that we're probably not going to get it right on the first try. And so one of the things that we started to see on our program is that we would do something and then come back and be like, oh, maybe we could have done a little better at being inclusive on this. I think something like our holiday schedule is a good example of this, of an internal thing. We developed our holiday schedule, we looked at it again, we were like, oh, maybe actually we weren't considering as many groups as we could have that were very important. Or on our activities, down to wash facilities. If we worked on wash facilities in a school or in a public place, where are we making the facilities accessible for as many people as we could? And we'd often find in site visits that we were not, and we would fix it. We would go back and see if we can do something to make the facility more inclusive. So we knew we weren't going to get it right from the beginning, and that it was going to take some time to think differently. But we didn't view those as detrimental or going to ruin the whole kind of journey. And it was about learning and maintaining that learning as we continued. I think another, and thinking about scalability of this specific approach, and in working in Iraq, in a very, very, very diverse country, it's recognizing how context-specific inclusion is. You might have some national level idea of what inclusion means and what are the challenges for being more inclusive. But in our program, what we've seen is that it really comes down to neighborhoods. It comes down to social economic factors, religious ethnic factors, experience, whether or not the community was directly affected by recent conflict or not. And so the first few months, whether it was with the program or looking at programming, we just did a lot of listening and intentional question asking to really understand what were the nuances within the different communities we were working in. And we also recognized that the needle could shift as we programmed. We might go to a community and learn something, do some programming against what we've learned, and then see that we could possibly push it a bit more with our partners to be more inclusive as well. So we always like to challenge the assumptions that we develop. And I really think that's important for us and everybody that's considering this journey. Another part, and again, this is related, we really started small. Really, the first step we took was thinking about what inclusion meant to us. I don't think there's anything more simple than doing that. You know, getting your team around the table and just talking about, you know, what are some of the groups that are facing challenges in being part of our team? What are some of the groups that we're not able to fully include in our activities that we know are out there and we're not able to reach? And just starting at that very, very basic level and start building from there. You don't have to have the full picture and a full work plan, I don't think, and really kind of thinking through, you know, where is your starting point, and then consistently and constantly reevaluating the direction you want to go into as you learn, as you push the fold, as you reach more communities. As you become a more inclusive program, you're always going to find the goalpost is always going to move, and that's okay. And sometimes it might go in the other direction, and that's also okay. But I think starting small and seeing where it takes you is definitely advice that I would give others.
Yeah, thanks, Saeed. The whole process can be exciting and a little painful until you figure out if you are on the right direction. But of course, learning and relearning and unlearning is also important during the process of implementing GESI principles. So Sabreen, why don't you tell me a little advice for programming?
Okay, yeah, sure. So for the programming, I would say that the intentional design that we are doing, so as I mentioned before, that we are evaluating on a GESI level for our activities or grants, then we are intentionally designing those activities or grants based on the, let's say, the community needs, based on the needs that we learned from our inclusive data collections and everything, or conducting research and surveys that we are doing. So based on those results, we are doing the intentional design in our activities and grants. Also, I mentioned like we should look at the impact, not just numbers. So I mentioned before that the women, there were participation by women. However, they were not talking. Sorry. So they were only attending the parents' council without even raising their voice. So their voice were not heard. What we did, so if we looked on only the numbers, so it would not be a good approach. So what we did, we were looking at the impact of this participation. That's why we did those sessions like only for women, so they can feel more safer of talking and like raising their voice and to be heard.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sabreen and Saeed. Just to summarize, think about the quality, the meaningfulness of the participation, intentionally design, don't just figure it out later. From the start of any programming, any M&E tools, HR policies, think about the different aspects intentionally, localize it, buy in more teams to be onboarded, and start large and then figure out and learn through the process how to be more inclusive. That's really inspiring. Thank you so much, both. So we are not done here. We have more 10 minutes. People are excited. They are sending so many questions. So I'm gonna start with one of the questions. And I think our colleague answered a couple of questions before in the chat. There is this lady, Razan Farman. She is COO and founder of Creed. She is asking a couple of questions, and Sabreen, the first one, I will ask it to you. What challenges have you faced in recruiting and building inclusive teams?
Thank you.
So I think she is referring to the challenges of, for example, finding or not finding qualified participants, or it can be even bias from the team.
Yeah, so what we did in our recruitment policy, our HR team worked on this recruitment policies, and we were we make sure to be inclusive, and as we did in our internship program. So what we did, we were more inclusive by equipment, female and male in our internship program. So this is what we did as a JC advisory group.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Like HR policies, because of the not having presence of qualified people in some sectors. The second question that I'm gonna actually ask Saeed about it's from Ms. Razan. Participation of women in workforce is critical. How have you dealt with the barriers that prevent women from access to the workforce internally and in your program? And I think we touched base on the answering this question earlier, but Saeed, would you like to summarize quickly?
Yeah, sure. And I think this is something we really thought hard about from the beginning, and just looking at our team. To be honest, when we first came in, the ratio of men to women on our staff was pretty surprising. And so we thought hard about what could possibly be some of those barriers that were preventing them from joining the workforce. And one of the first things that we developed was a hybrid work policy. We all had learned from COVID and our experience with working from home that it was possible to get things done while you work from home. And we recognized that in the Middle East, based off of different cultural traditions, that women had kind of specific or were expected to have specific responsibilities at home. So by providing our hybrid policy, it really opened up a lot of doors for women to join our team and give people more flexibility, and men as well, that were playing kind of different roles at home, gave them more flexibility to take on the job, a demanding job, I'm not going to lie, but have the flexibility to take care of any affairs they have at home. And we saw that really, and we use that as a tool to attract talent and to incentivize women to join our program. We also looked at things like our sick leave policy, and we expanded it to include loved ones, family members. If they were sick or needed care, you would be able to use our sick leave policy as well. We developed a companion policy. Our program operates across Iraq. A lot of positions are required to travel. So we developed a policy that if a staff member felt that more comfortable or that it would help them achieve their job to travel with a companion, that we would cover the cost of that companion joining them. And that was actually a very, very small concession that we were able to make that really enabled a lot of people to expand their ability to support our program. And it's something that I think we're all very proud of. But we recognize there's always space to do more, and it's we're continuing on that path of what other ways we can kind of break down some of those barriers very slowly. And I think what Sabreen touched on as well, the internship policy, we would release, recruitment ads for entry-level positions in the IT sector and for our IT team, our security team, and we just wouldn't get diverse CVs. We wouldn't get any CVs from women. So when we went out and designed our internship program, that was something that we took into consideration, is how could we open the door for more people into specific roles that they weren't traditionally filling.
That's wonderful. And I think just to add to what Saeed said, that actually the best solution always listen to the underrepresented group themselves. What solutions would they provide? Don't assume what solution would be the best for them. Ask them if that solution works for them or not, and if they can provide you with a solution on their challenges, because I think, you are just making them more underrepresented when you just assume what solution works for them. Thanks, Saeed, for that. There's another question, and I would like to ask it to Sabreen, that one of our participants asks if we could say anything about inclusion of LGBTQ groups, whether in programming or internally. And I think, Sabreen, you have an answer for that regarding how the program has been accessible for everyone. Would you like to tell us more?
Yeah, sure. So we as a program, as we mentioned in our recruitment, in our work, we are trying to be inclusive by giving the space for everyone to we are hiring anyone that regardless of what they are from, where they are coming. So in our recruitment and in our policies also. As a JC advisory group, we are trying to do that in our program.
That's perfect. That also allows anyone with people with disability, ethno-religious groups, gender fluid, and we have introduced the gender fluidity to our team. So not in terms of promoting for women or any other underrepresented group, but in terms of respecting the diversity in our team. Saeed and Sabreen, thank you so much. This has been a really wonderful discussion, a lot of learning. I hope everyone will benefit from that. And we would love to stay with you more and talk about this for hours and hours. But unfortunately, we are coming to the end. I hope everyone benefited from the discussion, and have a good day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.